for March 10th to order. Roll call, please.
Yeah, Commissioner Falk.
Here.
Commissioner Collar.
Here.
Commissioner Kazan.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Present.
Commissioner Carlson.
Here.
And Chair Callahan.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Abelman is not here, but we do have a quorum and we can conduct business.
Lisa, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Of course. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. All right, item D, approve order of agenda. I understand we need to move some things around.
Well, there's a request and it's up to you guys though.
Okay, we have with us tonight City Manager Mike Wodzansky to discuss budget items, and if we could move item
L1.
L1 up to now. If we could move that up, I think he would appreciate it
Just move it up before the public hearing.
for the public hearing. So is there a motion?
Move to move the item L1 up to just before J.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. Okay. Blue folder items, do we have any?
We do not.
Good. Consent calendar, approval of affidavit of posting, and the approval of the minutes of February 10th. Is there a motion or any changes to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. No excluded. Public participation on non-agenda items. This section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on this agenda for action. This section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written requests, if any, will be considered first under this section. Is there anyone who wishes to speak under public participation on non-agenda items? I see none in the audience. Do we have any e-comments?
No e-comments and no
Zoom?
participants in Zoom.
All right. Moving right along. Ex parte communication on public hearings. Do we have any?
We have a public hearing tonight. It's J1.
Right. Do we have any ex parte communications?
Yes. City staff.
Okay. Lisa? Any ex parte, no communications? I have none.
I have none.
Okay. We are to public hearings. But first, we're going to do L1 with Mike Wodzansky, our city manager.
Dun, dun, dun.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me tonight, and I'm happy to be here as I am each spring to gather your input on the preparation of the annual budget. So rather than come back to you after staff and we've worked on the budget together internally and propose it to council where it's ready for their consideration and adoption, gather feedback from you all to help inform that process and to make sure that we're thinking through any potential issues that you think as a commission we should be considering as part of that process. I think we've started that rotation this year. I attended the Public Safety Commission a couple of weeks ago, and you're the second group to be in front of, and I will complete that cycle towards the end of April with the rest of the commissions. We propose our budget, as you know, each year mid-May by May 16th. That's our charter requirement. And we strive to do that again this year and hope to have what I would call a business as usual budget for the most part. I don't see any massive shifts one way or the other from a revenue or expenditure standpoint. We continue to see slow progress and steady improvement in our property tax revenue base. We continue to be relatively flat as it pertains to our sales tax data. Our transient occupancy tax continues to be a relatively flat revenue line. So our growth year over year has been, for the last few years now, primarily on the property tax valuation basis and what we call the property tax in lieu fee, which is kind of a state accounting practice that is offsetting money they took away from us years ago from vehicle license fees that used to be a local revenue source and then were transmitted to the state. Both of those revenue sources are looking to show, I think, $1 million to $2 million total year over year increase. So that's solid increment for us. We do have new expenditure pressures throughout the organization. We have labor agreements, multi-year labor agreements with our various associations. That affects our harbor uplands and tidelands funds as we have many staff members that are directly charged to those locations, particularly our harbor patrol function, as well as our dedicated marina public works maintenance personnel. So there will be some effect there. The Harbor Uplands and Tidelands Fund, which I know is near and dear to all of your hearts, continues to improve from where it was post-COVID, but we are not yet to structural balance. We are showing at year end this fiscal year a likely subsidy need from the general fund. We have set money aside to plan for that and help close that gap at year end. I suspect when we go into proposed budget cycle, we will likely still be short ongoing revenues to ongoing expenditures, so we'll have to be careful there. We'll be limited in any of our additional capital resource allocation. We'll hold off on those spends for another year or so. But we are recovering. Revenues are growing. We have new leases coming on board. I think we have two gentlemen here tonight who are hopefully going to be very contributory towards that in the near future. We're excited to see those two properties come on board. In general, leasing across the waterfront has been improving. I know Greg's been keeping you up to date on vacancy rates and the like. So we're pleased with that. The growth just isn't there yet compared to where we were sort of pre-COVID. We're also seeing parking revenues come back online. It's going to be an area of focus for us next year. I'll be working with Greg and his team and our code enforcement, really parking enforcement personnel, to make sure that we're getting everything we can out of our various parking structures and spaces. So that'll be an area of emphasis going into this budget and next year's operating sort of practice and program. But generally speaking, we are thrilled with where we're at with the waterfront from a spend standpoint, because we have made so many strides on a capital improvement basis. As you know, the International Boardwalk pavers, the skate park, the murals, the dredging project being concluded now. We spent more money on the capital side in the waterfront the last 3 years than I think we did the preceding 15. So that was great, very positive. It's put us in a good physical space, but it has taxed our piggy bank, so to speak. We have spent a lot of our reserve tidelands and uplands monies, and that's what has ultimately put us into a bit of a tight space operating wise, both in the uplands and tidelands. So we're monitoring it. I think we'll see more progress this year. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's just something we've got to keep tabs on. And we will have to continue to support the waterfront with some general fund contribution to keep it balanced, I think, for the next year or two. So that's part of the proposed budget. That will be part of our core proposal to council in May. Trying to think on the operating side, areas that you might be curious about. We'll continue our very rigorous overall capital improvement program. Funds that we do have set aside that are related to the waterfront that will be in play next year. We hope to have more favorable bids associated with the seismic upgrades down in the old Fun Factory space. Our first round of bidding didn't go as well as we had hoped. It was about $1 million over our engineer's estimate and about $1 million over our roughly $2.5 million of general fund money that we had set aside for those improvements. We're trying to value engineer the project to a point where we can bring that cost down and hopefully execute that project within existing resources without having to appropriate additional money. So that's an area that we're currently focused on. I don't need to give you the update on the Seaside Lagoon or the boat launch. I know Greg and company are keeping you well informed on that. Those two capital projects continue to be a major priority for our staff, not just in the waterfront department, but also our public works and specifically our engineering team as well. So a lot of resources dedicated to that. Those are the three capital efforts next year, I think, in the waterfront that will be priority, and we'd like to see them through. On a partnership basis, the breakwater repair, we did get some good news from the Army Corps of Engineers. Despite all the turmoil in Washington, it does look like our Army Corps project to repair our breakwater, which we have, I think, estimated $10 million of funding from the state, from the feds, is on schedule. And once they get through environmental this spring, I think they're hoping to get the repair going sometime in 2025. I don't know. I think the window's a little tighter. There are some environmental constraints that they have to manage and work around, but I believe they're hoping to make that repair this calendar year, which is exciting. We've all been waiting for it for quite some time. So that will be a partnership effort. We'll continue to seek grants through the Department of Boating and Waterways to help supplement our efforts. That's obviously the goal when it comes to the boat launch. We've set enough money aside to design and get our grant application ready as much as anything else. Get that prepared, and then our hope is that DBAL will step in and fund our final plans and specifications and then the ultimate construction effort, so we don't have to spend our own resources for that. But that project obviously will be very accretive to our long-term health, and will finally, in a sense, check the box that has held us back from a lot of our LCP requirements down in the waterfront for quite some time. So very exciting efforts. We continue to be, we think, fully funded for the first phase of the Seaside Lagoon rehabilitation project by focusing on our waterworks, if you will, our water utility. We'll be able to make significant improvements, get us out of that water discharge operation that's created so much trouble for us with our Regional Water Quality Control Board and our NPDES permit requirements. So very excited to see that work proceed. That'll help us not just on the physical improvement, from a physical improvement standpoint, but it'll help us with our operating expenses as well, because as you know, we're spending anywhere from $50,000 to $125,000 a year paying the state in water discharge fines, which is exceedingly frustrating, considering it's sort of hard to argue that we're doing anything really meaningful to the water that's coming through our system. So we're excited to close that loop, figuratively and literally. But yeah, that's sort of the state of the waterfront. I'm happy to answer any questions on the Harbor Enterprise, but I'm also happy to answer any questions you might have about general operations that flow through our budget. Obviously, it's the biggest policy decision the council makes each and every year. Our general fund budget right now is hovering around $110 million. Structural revenues look, as I said, solid. We do have some looming expenses that we'll be keeping an eye on. We have increased unfunded accrued liability payment this year due to PERS's performance with their portfolio. We've known about it. We've been planning for it. We have some money set aside for it, but that is another commitment that we'll make this year that will, in a sense, I use the word stress somewhat lightly in this case. It will stress our resources. It's something we have planned for. It's not a massive change to operation, but it is something that we would otherwise not, we would rather not spend money on if we didn't have to, but we are prepared to do so. So don't have much to offer at this point. We'll be preparing final estimates and expenses and revenues here in the next month or two. Now is really the opportunity for you all to give me some early policy feedback, any thoughts on projects, perhaps this fiscal year. If we can't afford them, maybe they're good for next fiscal year. Most of these ideas take several years to implement anyway. So I'm all ears and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Greg, don't we usually send a letter
You do.
with our primary wish list?
Yeah, typically you do. We usually have a back and forth with our city manager today, and
Okay.
usually this group votes to assign someone to write a letter.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason I'm here to you early. So you got a couple of meetings to do that. The budget will be submitted to council in the middle of May. So you got a little
We
bit of time.
appreciate the early warning.
Yeah.
Yes, because time slides by.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so thanks as always for coming. That letter we've sent, that wish list we had for a bunch of years in a row, a couple of years ago when the budget was good, you pretty much were like Santa and gave it all to us.
Well, you know.
And then last year we knew it was thin, and I don't think last year we asked for too much. It was kind of just, a continuation and, finish what's on your plate. And thank you for getting more staff in his office. Thank you also for fixing up the Harbor Patrol boats. I don't think you mentioned that, but they look great. They're really active, and they will be doing a great job as the harbor gets busier and busier. I did have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
When the boat ramp comes in, it looks like, I think the decision is we're getting rid of the hoist. Is there any significant savings there? Do you know offhand what the hoist costs us a year?
Not really. You might remember, we spent about $500,000 repairing that
Yeah.
structure a few years
I knew it was
back.
kind of non-recurring, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm hoping, well, let me put it this way, I'm hoping no, meaning we won't have to put anything else
Yeah.
into it between now and actual ramp execution. But on an operating basis, it's just not that heavily used. I think it's part of our contract with our property management firm. It's a fairly small line item, but those add up. And when you couple that with our change in our little parking attendant program down there, if we can shed a few of those moldy expenses, those will accrue to a better bottom line for us longer term. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, the things I would suggest, and we can subcommittee this or discuss them more. Moonstone Park is always out there, somewhat funded, probably not adequately funded. And then I'd pick off something else from the amenities plan. I mean, that parking lot is starting to look great. You guys are resurfacing it, new lights on the trees, new sign.
Well,
surf
credit
club,
to our partner in
know.
that, Alan and his team. It's been a collective effort there. They've been really helpful in helping us execute that project. And we're looking forward to a significantly improved space.
Yeah, so if there was something I could that we could pick off from the amenities plan, some nodes, some wayfinding, some benches, planters, extend the stuff we're already doing on International Boardwalk, it can be kind of low fruit.
Yep.
Just so that when people come down there, they go, wow,
Bike racks.
yeah,
Yeah,
lots of little stuff.
utility screens, there's a few conversations we've been having that I think, we're at a point now where the accoutrements are mattering. You'll see our electronic directory signs are going to start to go in. We've got our first pilot sign ready to go in down at the main entrance to the pier here fairly soon. I know they
Yeah, I
were
think-
testing the board and it looks good. And if that one works well and holds up in the elements, we'll order a few more. And, that'll replace the old kind of static directories that we've had down there that have been really out of date for years, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have seen also that there's an app that I think the Peer Association runs, so there is already something on the phones.
Which is great. And those will, I think, work better in partnership.
Yeah. Thanks, that's it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Commissioner Bauer? I was curious, do we have funding for the harbor master then? If
We have funding in this year's budget, and I know how successful the program is, and it is one of our charges to ensure, that we can, in a sense, we call it adding that to our core budget, right? So we do one-time funds to sort of test or pilot programs. When they're successful, I seek to add them to the core budget so we can sustain them. I know how well received the harbor master's been. Kurt's doing a fabulous job. And I know the feedback's been very positive. So and anything you have to say about that, I'm all ears tonight. But our goal is to try to absorb that into our operations going forward.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, and I just echo what Roger said, anything low-hanging fruit. I'd love to see, forward movement on the education facility, of course. I know you guys are working on that as well, which is,
Conversations are ongoing,
yeah, because that's going to bring more people down here. And hopefully, you said essentially, you said sales tax was flat, right? But I mean, obviously, it's increasing because the leases are, right, where we are seeing.
Well, when I say sales tax, just so I can be clear, I mean citywide. Sales are, and while sales tax is important in the waterfront and it accrues to the general fund bottom line, it's a part of a much bigger picture. So our sales tax leakage, not that this would come as a surprise, is primarily occurring at the South Bay Galleria site. That's a shopping center that used to generate somewhere between 40 and 60% of our annual general fund sales tax and is now down into the 10 to 20% range. So that's why we're flat. We've had great success in Riviera Village. We've had a good uptick in the waterfront with new restaurants, new hotels, et cetera. We just, unfortunately, when it comes to big box retail, general commodity good purchases, we don't have a great inventory for that in the city outside of our sort of northeast quadrant, if you will. And while the marketplace area where you've got, Total Wine and Ulta Beauty and Living Spaces and that Sprouts, and that's doing fairly well. Target's, it's one of Target's highest performing stores. Those are all positive. The old Galleria is, as we all know, quite tired and needs a refresh. So we're hoping to see that improve. But specific to your concern in the uplands and tidelands, yes, we are growing, we are improving. We just haven't eclipsed that lever point yet to mirror our expenses.
Yeah, well, that's all from me, except for thank you so much, because I think there's been a lot of progress, and I've heard a lot of positive feedback, which is great. And anything we do to continue to get the word out, right, that it's a fantastic.
You all are our best ambassadors for what's happening down the waterfront. You know it better than everybody, so yeah, appreciate that.
Commissioner Curzon?
Yeah, thanks again. I can echo a lot of what's been said already, but as far as like next year's budget, I guess the things I would look for, and I don't know if you have a more detailed Gantt chart of the amenities plan had kind of like the short-term, midterm, long-term. We've tackled a lot of the short-term, but there's a bunch more. And so seeing like what can we tackle next year? Some of it is low-hanging fruit. Some of it is maybe pieces of something that's going to take a bit longer, like promenade and nodes and things like that. But it would be good to see some, investment in those areas to move those along in
Sure.
short-term things.
And the timing's good because in our April meeting, we're going to be talking about the strat plan and what our priorities are. So we'll probably go into a lot of those short-term goals in the amenities plan and try to pinpoint some of those. So we can correlate this budget discussion with the strat plan discussion next time.
And one thing I'd interject on is it will be important. We don't want to lose momentum, and I think you all agree with it. We don't want to lose momentum on the boat launch. We don't want to lose momentum on Seaside Lagoon, and we don't want to lose momentum on our parking seismic upgrades for Fun Factory. But what comes complementary to that is our reemphasis on leasing opportunities that will come when those amenities are better understood, right? Particularly the site plan for the boat ramp. Things like maybe a possible market hall down at the end of Moldy, a recycling of the tenant space at the Fun Factory site. We have Pad 2 still up on the Horseshoe Pier that it can be leased. We've got turnover potentially occurring out on Mondstadt Pier and other places. So we want to make sure we've got bandwidth to focus on the commercial releasing side, because partnering with the private sector is going to help us see those tenant improvements and investments get made as well. So we want to keep some of that partnership vibe a priority going into the next couple of years too. And that's a big lift. I mean, it's a lot of time and energy for our team here. Everybody, all four of them are deeply involved one way or the other. So it's important to note that that's going to be a big push in the next 2 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. The only other question I had was on the pump station that is halted. Is that going to cause an extra chunk of money for us to just execute that while we
Good
deal
question. Thankfully, it's a different funding source. That's funded through our sewer fund, our wastewater fund. So it doesn't affect the harbor uplands and tidelands. It affects the appearance and the operations down there. And we desperately want to see that project concluded. First and foremost, the Portofino pump station, which I understand is the underground work is done. We're now above ground with the actual vertical structure. So I think we're nearing the end of that project, which is super important. We have halted the work at Yacht Club, and we are working with the contractor to figure out the best path forward. There was a lot of difficulty dealing with the dewatering requirements associated with the project. So we're trying to sort through how best to proceed. But the focus right now is to getting that Portofino station built and online and getting out of that space.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Lisa, let's start down here with you.
So some more positive feedback on the harbor master. His monthly email that he sends out with the newsletter, yes, has been very well received. I pass it on to lots of people, especially the contact information and the information about how to sign up for the alerts. It's just been a really, really good thing, and I've gotten good feedback from the people that I've sent it to. Also, I've gotten feedback, maybe not so happy, but good, about the new enforcement efforts that have been going on down in the harbor. And people are like, yeah, it's not really personally very fun, but we're glad to see it happening because it's overdue. So thank you for that.
Our goal always is compliance. That's what we really want. So, yes.
My question is about the Chevron Coker money for Moonstone Park and redo the updating and fixing up of Moonstone Park. Is that something that would be possible?
Not next year. So what Moonstone candidly is going to be a few years out unless we identify additional funds to catch up on the backlog of what's going on right now. But it has remained on the capital improvement program schedule, and we will continue to keep it there out of the commitments that have been here for years. We know how important that project is. We'd like to see it done. We just have to get there, be funded, and move it forward. So
is that money effectively gone?
it was part of the Tidelands fund balance, so it's there on paper, it's pledged as an out-year capital project, so it will be available again. It's just not immediately available in the fund, in part because of the stress of the fund overall.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Caller?
Well, everybody's pretty much covered everything, so I've got nothing further to ask.
Yeah, my only concern about that Moonstone Fund is with 33% inflation over the years, if we had 2 million to start with, we're now down to 1.4 million. And the buying power and the purchasing power of that is just, I see it just like sand in an hourglass, just dissipating. Is there any way we can, if we're lending it to the Tidelands, can we get an interest on it?
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Well, sadly, right now, what's happening is there's the lending is really coming from the general fund to the Tidelands in general, just to manage operations. So I wish that were the case. And I couldn't agree more. Whereas when we first received that money, the 2.4 million, whatever it was at the time, we felt like, oh my goodness, this is more money than we know what to do with for little old Moonstone Park. And unfortunately, I think that's, to your point and your analogy, that's flipped. So it's disappointing. I will get there eventually. I have faith. We've been successful the last few years because we've been focused and we have been committed and very deliberate about what we're executing on. And that goes to all of your support, goes to staff and their work and a dedicated public works team. But we have made progress because of that focus. So I'm hopeful that a year from now, we're, the boat ramp and the lagoon are starting to turn the page. And then when that happens, that gives us the ability then to kind of turn our focus to the next task, which, Moonstone's right there on the edge. It's not too far away.
Okay. I have nothing else. Any other last thoughts? Well, we thank you so much for coming and giving us a heads up so we can get our committee together.
Absolutely. Thank you for all that you do. Appreciate working with you. And Waterfront, going to be another good year. I'm certain of it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Committee now?
Pardon me?
Make a committee now?
You want to do
Or
that?
do we do it at the next meeting?
It'd be easier to do it now.
What's that?
Do a subcommittee now.
If you guys want to form one to do a letter, that's
Yeah, I think that would
absolutely
be
within
a
your purview
marvelous
tonight.
idea. Anybody interested in chairing it?
He looks at
It's
Roger.
your idea.
I'm on all of them.
You want to do it?
Sure.
Okay, we've got one. We need two more. Lisa, you're really good with numbers. Would you like, it's a really easy subcommittee.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, and Lee, you're,
I would suggest that Lisa and I are the newest here, so maybe someone that's been here a little bit longer. Of course, we got Leslie.
we got Leslie, and we also have a boilerplate of the past letters that we have written. So you can see maybe the last 3 years, what we've asked for, what's actually happened, and so on. So it's not like you're reinventing the wheel. So I know Lee is really good with numbers.
All right, I'll do it.
Okay, there we go. Is everybody amenable to these three? All right. We have our subcommittee.
Timeline for that?
Well, just before May,
Yeah.
Okay.
I would suggest maybe meeting first, but maybe waiting until after our strat plan discussion in
Could we
April.
have staff send the last 3 budget letters from the Harbor Commission to these 3 so they can review them before they meet?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. That way they'll have something to work with. Okay. All right, we've already done ex parte reveals. So now we're ready for public hearings, discussion, consideration, and possible action on any exemption declaration and a conditional use permit for a restaurant use and a commercial recreational club use on property located within a coastal commercial CC3 zone in the coastal zone. All right.
Thank you, thank you. So real quick, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Jang, Senior Planner with our Community Development Department. We also have our two applicants here, Alan Sanford and Jeff Jones, who are both partners on the California Surf Club project. I just kind of wanted to give a brief overview of why we're here talking about this project for a third time. If you recall, in 2022, the initial conditional use permit was approved by this group. And then a subsequent amendment was approved in September of 2023, and that was because of some design changes that the applicant had made. We're back here tonight really to memorialize the commercial recreation club aspect of it. If you recall, this group talked about that use quite a bit in deliberation, but for some reason it never was captured in the resolution. So we just want to make sure that it is in the resolution and it is an approved use. So that's the intent behind the big one tonight. The other issue is that over the last 30 years, both those buildings have been utilized as restaurant uses on and off again. Different operators, different CUPs have been applied for. The interesting thing about conditional use permits is that they stay with the land. So once they're approved, they're there. So when you have that many CUPs active, you've got that many additional conditional use permit conditions that the applicant has to abide by. And what we learned while we were going through the building permit process after this group approved the use permits was deciphering all of those old conditions was very problematic for our planning staff, for our building and safety staff. So really what we want to do is expunge all of those old CUPs so that this one is, and the one that we're using, is truly the only remaining CUP that's active. It's common practice in the planning world that when a new CUP comes, you expunge the old one. That just wasn't done over the years, so we're doing it now, playing a little catch up. In addition, we've added a few conditions of approval related to the ancillary equipment rental portion of the club use. What we're doing citywide right now, and this is a little ahead of where we're at, but we want to create an ordinance, and we're drafting that ordinance now that essentially puts and places the conditions of approval that you're reviewing tonight into an ordinance that applies to everybody in the marina. So whether you have a legal business or not, and there's some illegal ones out there, that if you violate any one of these issues, the Harbor Patrol can actually fine you, okay? Right now, we have no teeth with our regulations. The illegal operators simply need to apply for a business license and a conditional use permit. Nobody really has a conditional use permit. In fact, we're working on a comprehensive conditional use permit all in Basin 3. All of those operators, the whale watchers, the fishing vessels, the glass boat bottom, none of those have CUPs. We're trying to memorialize that. It was just overlooked all these years. They're also going to have very similar conditions of approval that we're looking at tonight. So this is really the first time you're reviewing those conditions, but it's something that's going to be seen in the near future and for every single operator that ends up coming through this process. So that's the backstory. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen to walk you through the CUP itself. And then, of course, we've got our applicants here too if you have any questions.
All right, thank you. Good day, my name is Stephen. I'm presenting this item tonight. The subject site at 239 and 245 North Harbor Drive contains two existing commercial buildings that have been utilized as a restaurant for over 30 years. The buildings themselves are about 11,124 square feet in size with plenty of outdoor dining and seating areas. The parking lot, which the buildings serve, contains a total of 719 parking spaces. However, the uses themselves only require 357 spaces. In addition to the approved or the proposed use, as Greg mentioned, staff is recommending to expunge the previous 9 CUPs for the project site so that only the most recent CUP remains. In doing so, it'll help with future confusion and will reduce the confusion with permitting and planning related matters. The site themselves are the site itself is zone CC3, which is coastal commercial. The uses to the south and west are also zone CC3. The property to the north is zone CC4, and Seaside Lagoon is zone PR-PRO, which is parks, recreation, and open space. The applicant is proposing to allow a restaurant use and a commercial recreational use. The north building at 245 North Harbor Drive is the public-facing restaurant that anyone can use or patron. The commercial recreation club use would occupy 239 North Harbor Drive, and is only accessible to patrons that pay for a membership via day passes, monthly passes, or annual passes. It is designed to provide reprieve from the recreational activity in the ocean. Swimmers, boaters, kayakers, etc. can utilize the commercial club and take a break from the water. Paid membership includes the use of amenities like the dining areas, the outdoor decks, the conference rooms, game room, art room, etc. A portion of the commercial recreational club use business model includes the rental/loan or free loan of recreational equipment such as kayaks, canoes, and stand-up paddle boards. The proposed hours of operation for the equipment rental would run in conjunction with the restaurant use. Additional conditions of approval have been added that prohibit nighttime rentals and loans and includes other regulations to improve overall safety. On this site plan, the intended area, proposed area for storage is going to be the little red rectangle on the top left of the site plan. Additionally, no structural changes are proposed with this proposal. It's only going to be a use change and minor change in the area for storage of equipment. Based on the findings, staff believes that the project meets the findings by facilitating access to the waterfront areas for leisure and recreational use for the public, that there will be no significant noise impacts proposed by the use, that the site is adequate in terms of parking and accessibility, and pedestrian access to the area will not be impeded by this proposed use. As such, staff recommends that the Harbor Commission make the findings as set forth in the attached resolution, adopt the exemption declaration, and approve the conditional use permit, subject to the plans and applications submitted and the conditions contained in the staff report and resolution. This concludes my presentation. We're available for any questions. Thank you.
All right.
So I think one of the great things about doing this now is, if you remember in the last amendment, we were still pretty unsure about the parking. We knew that the building square footages were staying the same, so we weren't really concerned about there being a lack of parking. But since that last meeting, we were able to do the parking study related to the boat launch. And we've learned that we have a surplus of parking in that lot. So now that overall question about whether or not there's enough parking out there to substantiate all the uses has been laid to rest. Now we're going to use that supply, that surplus. Seaside Lagoon's going to expand in its use, hopefully, and it's becoming a year-round venue. And then, of course, the boat launch itself is going to carve into that surplus as well. But we're positioned well, and we're happy about that.
Okay. All right, so questions for staff. Lisa, shall we start with you?
Sure. So I had a question. Oh boy, let me see if I can find it. Well, okay, and just in general. So the visitor serving commercial recreational use is the day rental and the month. I thought that it was for their members, but this indicates that they are actually making the rentals available to visitors.
Member being you've paid to be admitted.
Right. So
Right.
a day pass would be available to a visitor who wasn't.
Correct.
Here.
So they'd have to pay to get in, and then, I don't know what their business model is for the rentals, but
All right, and then it mentioned kayaks, surfboards, stand-up paddleboards, canoes, and other craft that can be launched by hand, but surfboards aren't allowed in the harbor.
you know what? Lee and I talked about this too. That's a great point. And surfboards aren't a part of the business model. I confirmed with the applicant today. So I would suggest that when we look at condition of approval number 16, we actually strike the word surfboard.
Okay, and also on their drawing, they have open showers and surfboard lockers, which, I mean, if they're just storing them in the locker,
Lockers.
that's fine, but it's right there by the water, so.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then I really liked the safety things that were included. Those are excellent.
There's a lot of thought process that went into
Saw
that.
Yes, greatly appreciate that.
What we've done is we created those, Mio's was a huge lift on Mio's part, but we created those to issue a temporary use permit for all of the existing operators in Basin 3
Right.
while we work on the permanent CUP solution. So we were able to borrow from those essentially and just kind of tailor them to be specific to California Surf Club.
I did wonder about the, was something about, they had, each vessel requires a certificate of inspection, a stand-up paddleboard.
Correct, because there is a rule that they have to have the leash and that they have to have a sticker that says some applicable phone numbers like the harbor master. And I think there's a map that needs to be on there too.
Okay, so that inspection will be for those requirements.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Caller?
Those are pretty much exactly the same questions I talked to Greg about earlier, so I think I'm good.
Okay. We'll start with Commissioner Carlson.
So first, I intend to join the club and have joined the club, so perhaps I should recuse myself from a vote or something, I'm not sure. But
I think because this pertains to all the operators, not just this.
No, are you talking about the rental conditions of
No, I'm
approval?
talking about Commissioner Carlson recusing himself because he's become a member of the California Surf Club.
It's definitely your prerogative. I would say all of us have patronized the restaurants down there and they come in and,
I'm always troubled by this.
right.
Yeah, I would like there to be, more restaurants in the harbor. I will go to them. So
If you're
at
comfortable.
least I've said it, and we'll see where this goes and how controversial
Right,
it
if
is.
we don't need your vote, you can recuse yourself.
But, so now a comment on, inspection of SUPs. This troubles me. And this troubled me too with the temporary use permit and the things we used to do to Olympus. Because I'll pick on Olympus instead of these guys. With Olympus and Jeremy, we have, okay, he's not brick and mortar, he's not paying all the taxes that Paddle House is. But we have, a pretty ideal applicant has a presence in the harbor, has a presence on the water, does a lot of training, is renting SUPs, or was, to people very hands-on, compared to, dive and surf that drops them off in a van and goes away. And recently they had two guys go out in a kayak and, and where's dive and surf? They're back in a van, back at their shop. They don't have a presence on the water the way Jeremy would or the way these guys would. Or let's go to, Spider up in Hermosa. They rent all this stuff. They're not on site. They're just going to give something to a guy, or REI up in Manhattan Beach, up on Rosecrans.
Yep.
What do we do with them? So, the good applicants who have a presence here and are on the water, trying to do the right thing, and I can say the same thing about the glass bottom boat guy chasing his paddlecraft around. The people who are, resident in the harbor and seeing these paddlecraft go out, we put burden on them. They do the extra inspection, they put these stickers on, and then someone else comes in, drops something off with a guy on the roof and says, see ya, and the next thing you know, they're, outside the harbor in the breakwall
Being rescued.
getting rescued.
Yeah.
So I'm a little troubled by the burden we put on people who are going through the process, and I know, we have some gray ones that we'll hopefully pick up, but there's going to be some we'll never get.
So it's a great point. What I'll say is this is step 2 of a 3-step process. First step was the TUP where we created these conditions. This is, I would say, in correlation with phase two, which is getting the existing operators with active CUPs with these conditions for safety. The third one is that ordinance that's going to apply to everybody and anybody. If Dive and Surf comes in and drops off their equipment and doesn't do anything and doesn't abide by these rules and regs, it's a finable offense. And we know where they are. So we're going to get there, but the ordinance is the permanent fix for, the bad players that are out there. Someone like this applicant or Paddle House or some of our brick and mortars who are always going to do it the right way. This is just to ensure that they will.
Okay, but you still have a loophole of just, somebody driving up.
Sure.
I just worry this is like, the leaf blower ban, which, is one more rule on the books. And the only thing that's changed is that, the Parks and Recreational Department now use water. They use water pressure. They use high pressure water jets to sweep up leaves instead of leaf blowers.
Right.
But on my street, there's still leaf blowers. So, maybe I should recuse myself, but I'm troubled by the burden we're putting on the good actors while we still have other people from outside of town doing the same stuff. It's, it's kind of unenforceable, except on the good actors who have a presence here. We're not going to put a cop at the hand launch.
No. He's not going to be stationed there. Right.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So Commissioner Carlson, so there's sort of two different aspects to this. Is putting it in the COP, you have to get the inspection, everything. And then there's a requirement, okay, if you're on SUP, you've got to have a personal flotation device with you, which is actually a US Coast Guard requirement. So even if we don't do anything, it's still a requirement.
Mm-hmm.
We can also say you have to wear a leash, which I do not think is a Coast Guard requirement. We can put that in the law. There's that. And then there's the thing, okay, we're going to go do an inspection to make sure there's a leash on in the stickers on the SUP. So I think it's the latter that you're saying, it's the burden that we're putting on. Like, I actually have somewhat of that same concern. It's like, I drive my car. My car's required to have brake lights at work. Nobody has ever inspected my car and given me a certificate that says, okay, your car is legal for the road. I mean, the concept of my vehicle as it was built but nothing for my specific vehicle. And so I wonder if just saying you have to have these things is good enough and you can enforce that rather than say, okay, you have to go get it. Because I can give you a certificate, okay, your paddleboard's got a leash on it. 2 weeks later, if the leash is gone or it breaks or something and.
Yeah, the car is a good example because we have car rental companies in town and, do we put extra burden on them or, over what the DMV already does? Bike rental, things like that. So I don't know. I kind of hate putting unenforceable rules and burdening the good actors, that are already trying to accommodate and grow the harbor.
But it's going to be an ordinance that's applicable citywide in the near future. So whether you say yes or no tonight and remove all these conditions.
I appreciate that, but
Yeah.
this is something I'll bring up then too. And I'll probably lose this battle, but what do we do about the guys from Torrance and
But the idea is to improve safety out there, and the more businesses that are abiding by it, you're limiting the ones that aren't. There's always going to be a few bad players, but you're trying to limit that.
I also just wanted to add, I think it's important that and I realize you're not going to hit everybody, but the more people who are out there on the water who have a sticker that shows them not to hang out in the lanes of traffic and that have a leash that hopefully they put around their ankle so that when they fall off the board, it doesn't shoot into the lanes of traffic. I think that is worth the onus of having the ordinance and having a harbor patrol out there, not that they're inspecting everybody, but looking to make sure that things are safe, because there's a lot of things out there that aren't safe. And to me, it's no different than having to get my car registration or having to get my smog check or whatever. There's a certain minimum education that I think boaters don't get. There's nobody out there checking to see if I have my boater's license either. I do, but lots of people don't. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing to do.
I think you're talking two slightly different things. I don't think anybody's disagreeing with the thing that we should have these regulations and ordinances. I think where the question is putting that extra burden on this business. Okay, you actually have to go and get a certificate of inspection.
Right. Okay, Roger, you finished?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Thanks for everyone's time.
Tom?
I see Roger's point. I really like, I like this way this was written. I think it was really well done. I love that this business is coming into the harbor. So, no, I'm fully behind it. And yeah, no, I don't know. Other than that, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Kruzan?
When we first reviewed this in, was it 2022? Love all the ideas and the, what this is going to become. Maybe I wasn't naive, but at that time I thought it was presented as parts of the building on the left would be, rent, private function, whatever, but it would still be public. And then it came to light later that no, this whole thing was going to be private. So the whole club of this whole thing being privatized wasn't talked about in 2022. And we specifically were banning the rental of SUPs and all of that. Just a point of, I don't know why it states in here that on page 16 that we, September 11th, 2023, we eliminated that prohibition because we did not at that meeting
Which prohibition?
on having rentable water-related equipment.
I remember having a discussion where
So if you go
a
back
few
to the
different
notes, it's not in there.
viewpoints, yeah, where it was, maybe we shouldn't get into the business model, like,
Yeah, and at that time, it was like, well, cart before the horse, like, we're just trying to, that's like plan B, we'll tackle that later.
right.
Anyhow, for the newer members, I don't think that was part of that meeting, nor was the privatization of that whole thing. So my only thing about talking about the privatization and having it be a club, that's membership and all, is I guess I would have expected the city to have presented something that, is there any onus on the city to say, hey, we had this public restaurant and now we're privatizing it in some way, just like the harbor, a club or something that exists? Is there some, I guess I was expecting a presentation from the city that says this is,
You mean, it's an allowable use, it's a change of use.
yeah,
Historically, they've both been restaurant buildings. One is staying a restaurant building that's open to anybody, no membership required. The other one is transitioning to what we call a commercial recreation use. We put club in parentheses just to be super clear to everybody.
right.
That
There's nothing
you-
the city has to do in saying, yeah, we're gonna take that space that was public and it's okay to turn it into private and then present that to the Harbor Commission.
That's the point tonight. It's a use
But
permit.
that whole point was ignored. Like, there was no presentation on that.
Do you mean tonight?
Yeah, or up until this point.
We've talked about, okay, we can go over it now. It's, the findings have to be made that the commercial use is, in compliance with the surrounding uses, that there's no negative effects.
Sure.
It's all in the resolution that you're looking at tonight. It wasn't presented to you, but it is in your backup documentation.
Yeah, those few rules of, coastal commission, all that stuff, I get, but I just wanted to make sure when you hear backlash in the community of like, this used to be a restaurant, now it's gonna cost, thousands of dollars to be a member. I have no idea how much it is, but I just feel like we owe some conversation about like, yeah, this has been considered and we haven't had that.
From a zoning perspective, the analysis of the conditional use permit and its findings is all the city really needs to do for a use like this.
Okay.
And so in the staff report for the findings for a CUP, staff did analyze it, and the use does meet the requirements for a CUP in this case. There isn't an extra requirement in terms of what you're thinking about, the quote-unquote limiting of the public aspect. The analysis is purely on what the proposal is and whether or not the CUP findings for the zoning ordinance meet.
Okay.
And in this case, it does.
And it's not like some things are more black and white, like it's zoned differently, but yet this is still the same zone.
Yes.
Zone's the same, but its use is quite different than what we had
Yeah,
before.
and I should have clarified that. So in the CC3 zoning district, commercial recreation is an allowed use under a CUP approval,
Okay.
which is what the purpose of this meeting would be for, to approve the CUP for the commercial recreational use, which in this case, why we added the clubber in parentheses is to clarify for the public and the applicant what the intention of this commercial recreational use is.
We just thought without the club in parentheses, it was too vague. It didn't clearly identify what they were doing.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had a conversation about that, and if anyone else had any comments on that. I had some, I guess people can comment on that or not, but some specific commentary. I didn't know why, I was curious, on page 21, it mentions the lagoon is anticipated to be rehabilitated. Is there some significance of why that is in there?
It's a neighboring use. It's directly adjacent to both buildings. We do expect that the usage of Seaside Lagoon will rise with our improvements that we have planned over the next few years.
Yeah.
So we thought it was applicable to put it in there.
Okay.
I think they're going to feed off each other, right?
Yeah.
Share a parking lot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then in replacing all of the prior CUPs, I didn't do a A/B comparison of all 31 items, but I guess were any of them changed, or which ones were changed from what we had before?
So
Obviously, all the recreational ones are new, but the other ones, are those all identical from what we had before?
for the most part, yeah. For the most part. What you're seeing before you is kind of the standard conditions that we have for CUPs. We did take out 4 that were in the original resolution that you guys saw for California Surf Club, because it had a lot of, it pertained to the building permit process that they had to go through. And since they're past that, we thought it didn't need to be in there anymore, just to kind of clean things up. It was things like, your building permits shall make sure that there's fire safety mechanisms in the building. Well, that's been done. It's installed at this point. So the construction side of things that have already been sorted out, we omitted from this one. That would be the only change,
So they were construction things, not
not use things.
like maintaining those as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And then just to add, other examples of conditions that were changed were square footage figures that no longer apply. Well, that's mainly it. A lot of the square footage figures got changed over the amendments. And so we removed the older square footage callouts because they're just outdated and don't apply anymore. And we're just going to provide brand new ones that are just for the existing building as is.
Okay. And then item 21, it says no rentals at night. Do we need to define night?
It's up to you. If you think we need more clarity there.
Yeah, I know we've done it for other, I guess those were noise things, but
Those were noise and deliveries and
yeah, I didn't know if we,
parking.
I guess it probably only pertains to having the vessels come back in before night when they don't have lights. So I don't know
Do you want us to add some language?
if night is dusk or night or sunset, or do we want to care about that, or?
Say a half hour after sunset or something, or sunset.
Sunset's a little more descriptive,
Yeah, it's an official time.
right? And it
People
changes.
probably want to be out there at sunset.
That's a good point.
It's true.
That's a good point.
Half hour after
Half
sunset.
an hour
You
out.
could say no usage is limited to half hour before sunrise up to half hour after sunset.
Yeah,
Okay,
that would seem reasonable.
I like that one, yeah. Because then Coast Guard rules kick in, gotta have a light.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid, right?
Right.
And then I was curious on the sticker, is that something that's been like discussed with the different operators versus a placard, or I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to use a sticker per se. It's just you could do a plaque, you could do anything that
Notice.
sticks to the board permanently.
An adhered notice.
Something,
Yeah, so I didn't know
yeah,
if you wanted to broaden sticker to sticker, placard,
notification or,
yeah.
An adhered notice.
I'd be open
I don't
to
know
that.
how onerous it was,
Yeah.
it was very specific,
I
so.
know, I know.
I think we're getting in the weeds.
Yeah, and then the only other thing was in item 26, it mentions no repair of boats. And I didn't know if we meant vessel, because up to that point, we were using the word vessel, or did we just mean,
Yeah, I think it was just an interchange there. Vessel would be more appropriate for
Okay.
consistency.
okay, that was it.
Yeah, because an SUP is a vessel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 26.
26?
So Paddle House rents boards at night. Are we being inconsistent or putting
Oh,
another
that's
burden
true.
on
No, they
one of
shouldn't be.
our people?
They shouldn't be.
It's a very nice thing. They have lights underneath. It's really pretty and fun. Fancy resorts do it.
I will say,
Water-
Why
Education
can't we
does
be like a
nighttime.
fancy resort?
Waterfront Education Center does nighttime kayaking.
Not anymore.
Hosted, led.
What'd you say?
Hosted and led by a leader. And does it not allow for special?
Yeah, that's different. Yeah.
Am I allowed to go
so the
by
same,
myself?
so the same condition that prohibits nighttime that we're adjusting for sunrise and sunset has a second sentence. Exceptions to this requirement may be granted in writing on a case-by-case basis by the Harbor Patrol. So you could request it. So Kurt essentially would sign off on it, probably be aware that there was some nighttime activity happening. And depending on the weather conditions, could grant it.
Or I guess you could be more general and just say, and I think it's already in here, following Coast Guard regulations.
Yeah, why are we trying to add regulations over the
Yeah.
Coast Guard? Because we're not
Just
doing
getting
that to
rid of-
cars.
Right.
Can we drive cars at night now?
Yeah. So where it has item 21 night, maybe that's just to be replaced with something, Coast Guard regulation, I can't.
I'm trying to look up the Coast Guard regs
Well, I mean,
for
Coast Guard-
paddlecraft at
Coast-
night. I think it's one white light.
Yeah, I mean, for a vessel that size, it's usually just a single all-around white light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that inadequate? Why are Coast Guard regulations inadequate for what we're doing?
Yeah, I guess, Greg, when you came up with that item 21, what was there additional motivation besides safety?
Safety.
Just safety?
Mm-hmm.
Prohibited at night. Yeah, I mean, it could just say vessel rentals shall be
It compliant.
compliant with United States Coast Guard regulations.
In the interest of not being more of a pain in the ass, I apologize for my language and for needing to use that language on myself. Can we say here that this applicant should be consistent with harbor-wide regulations?
Mhm.
And then when we address this another time, and I'm a pain in the butt again, we'll have something that applies to, Paddle House and these guys and everyone else? Including, the yacht club rentals and
Wait, say that again? What are you
They're
saying?
saying like simplifying this to
Simplify
just,
this whole thing. 'cause
I
this
worry
gets
that we're going to
pulled
wind
out.
up with two opposing regulations in two different places.
Yeah,
And
because
I'd
this
rather
is
have a
first.
pointer here that says, go look here, or Coast Guard rules apply, or
gonna
something
make
like
it
that.
super general now. And when we have the CUP discussion for Basin 3, marry them up.
Yeah.
Just be in compliance with the city ordinance, a
Be
related
be
city
in compliance with
ordinance.
Coast Guard and city ordinances.
Well, I guess that sounds good to me. What's the
You
timing
know, like,
of?
Right,
of
and that's
this
the
and
thing is, the ordinance could take 6 to 9 months to kind of traverse, right?
But
It has to go to this group, planning commission,
Yeah.
city council, and probably requires an LCP amendment. So that's coastal commission.
And when are we expecting vessel rentals to want to start?
With,
That would
with
be-
this potential applicant
Yeah.
in April.
Okay.
And then our Basin 3 operators are existing, right? We're memorializing their activity. So if we waited for the ordinance, we'd have about a year of gap time where there was no regulations. And that's kind of what we're trying to avoid with this multi-pronged, multi-step
Yeah.
situation.
I like the simplification.
I'm
that you're
worried about
offering.
winding up with two different regulations and two different points. And, and I could come back and say, all right, let's please add, you're not allowed to use a leaf blower on these rented subs. And you're also not allowed to murder anyone when you're on these subs. But, we also have laws against murder and leaf blowers already.
Yeah.
So do we need to add that?
Should a condition be added to clarify that any of these conditions will be superseded by city ordinances or the Coast Guard if they conflict?
Aren't they already?
Well, then we're waiting for the ordinance though. So, well, that's a good point though. Like
Because
this would kind of
stay
like,
active until the ordinance
This would
comes
be-
into play, and the Coast Guard will
Right.
still have authority over any conflicts if they were to come up.
That's the way to put it in a
yeah,
nutshell.
once an ordinance is in place, that essentially rules all.
Well, I would ask one question here. So there's a couple of things in here that's sort of unique to the rental situation. One is the sticker. Because, I have a SUP that's sitting on my boat. It doesn't have a sticker on it that tells me what's the safe areas of the harbor to navigate in. And so that would be something that would be unique to the harbor. It's not going to be a Coast Guard regulation. And I imagine the city's not going to make a requirement that every private SUP, somebody on the harbor has to have this sticker. So that would be something that'd be unique to rental. It sort of makes sense because you're assuming that people who are rental are less likely to be familiar with the harbor. Although I suppose you could argue in this case, since it's a private club, they generally would be, but will be less likely than someone who has their own SUP that they take down to the harbor or keep in the harbor on a regular basis.
Correct. I mean, this stuff wouldn't apply to just the regular citizen bringing his own board. This is only applicable, and the ordinance too, to commercial businesses operating in our harbor.
Roger, I can hear the wheels turning.
Yeah, I mean, I would turn it around and say that, this business has an inherent interest in getting that board back safely with the person on it having a happy, fun day and wanting to come back again. No one reads stickers. I don't know. I'm sorry to be such a problem on this, but
No, I hear your point. I agree. Nobody looks at the stickers, but at least some, and you mentioned, I think we do have to put some faith in our businesses. But there does, I'm opposed to regulation as a sort of unless it's necessary. And so I think we need to do something here, but I'm concerned that we're going way too far in just dictating everything.
I agree. We need a broader readdressing, being able to readdress at a later date by leaving something open. I don't want to get in the weeds. I don't want to say the stand-up paddle boards have to be different colors for each vendor. I mean, we can get into so many ridiculous requirements that it's going to kill the business. I think Coast Guard compliance is good enough.
I guess I'd like maybe to hear from the applicant, maybe regardless of what we're saying right now about this
Sure.
one subject, they're like, yeah, we're gonna put a
Right.
sticker on there anyhow. I've been in big groups that have rented paddleboards, and I was surprised that absolutely no instruction was given about, hey, there's a big channel with lots of boats, don't hang out in there, or don't hang out in the harbor, like nothing. And I think some of those people would have read a little map that said, go quickly through here, like. So I do see you telling that, but that would be my suggestion, is to hear about this particular question.
Yeah. And also the private side of stuff too. How does the club work?
Good evening.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Alan Sanford of the California Surf Club and Beach Life. Jeff Jones. You wanted me first to respond just on this vessel stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay. I know you're going to end up with different regulations once you get through the whole gamut of this tremendously complex language you're presenting. As a born and bred waterman, I probably don't follow half of those, and I'm probably more experienced and better in the water than most people out there. I see a lot of people out there. It's part of the reason of the California Surf Club is we are about culture. We're about teaching our kids the right way to do things. We probably will be safer than anybody on the water because it's like what we do as surfers, right? We learn safety. We learn how not to drown. A sticker's not going to change that. Nobody's going to look at a sticker, but I do understand some points of view of saying, well, why not get a sticker? It just makes it harder for us. We're going to have to take all the boards over to Kurt. Kurt's a busy guy. A sup is a sup. A leash is a leash. So it's kind of 6.5, one dozen the other. If it makes it simple for you guys, sure. I would very much like our language to say, we will follow the regulation of whatever you guys come up with, because I have a feeling you guys have a long conversation coming. And I don't want conflicting provisions. I also think it's pretty significant, and Greg and I talked about this. I mean, you're talking about a conditional use permit and the right to revoke a business or use. So just be sure the language that you put in there, you really want in there. Because guys like us look at these things and we actually follow them, right? We have to answer to people and we have to answer to our investors, and we don't break rules, which is why we're so particular on the front side of things. So that would be my recommendation. If you do want to anchor us down with the rules, I understand it from a safety perspective completely, but just maybe make some, I liked the suggestion of tying it to Coast Guard and to future city regulation. And by the way, we're just one business. Tonight's just about us. No matter what, you still have every other business that's not following any rules right now. So we're just talking about the California Surf Club. That would be my response to that particular issue.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Sanford?
Were you planning on renting out equipment for night use?
No, because it's a liability thing for us, but I will totally agree with Roger. I mean, many of the people involved in the club, like Danny Ching, myself, like we live more in the water than we live on land. Why can't we paddle at night? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why you wouldn't want to enjoy the ocean at night? It's probably as beautiful as the daytime, if not more peaceful. It doesn't make any sense to me, but if it's particular to you guys that you don't want people in the ocean at night, then who am I to say that you can't do that? You go out on the hill or out at Rad or Torrance, or just away from the
I
club.
just thought I'd ask you where you were coming from there.
Yeah. I do want to just make a statement on one point. The club issue or the club, I can happily email you guys my presentation from both 22 and 23. I think I probably mentioned club and use more than 100 times. The lease that we have with the city specifically calls out this type of use. I would have not entered into this business it hadn't. This is a paperwork issue. So if you go back and look at the video, it was very clear to the city. It was very clear in all our lease documents. It was very clear in all our meetings. In fact, there are people that don't agree with it, and I respect their opinions, but I really value transparency and honesty. It couldn't have been clearer. So the way that I'm viewing this meeting is a cleanup of a very, very messy CUP, which was impossible for us to even navigate what rule superseded what rule. It wasn't to have a whole new discussion millions of dollars later on whether this use is considerable. So I hope you guys will take that into consideration.
Jeff, do you have anything to add?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everybody. Great to see you. I would add, related to the stand-up paddleboard usage, I kind of liken the using the Coast Guard rules or having those be the guiding principles to running a restaurant. So when we open a restaurant, it's different than having your own personal kitchen. Your own personal kitchen, you abide by whatever you think is safe, just like the independent personal paddleboarder goes out and they do whatever they think is safe, right? When you have a business like we do, or like I do at Quality Seafood, we're beholden to the Department of Health regulations. They tell us what is safe and what is not safe when it comes to serving food, right? So it's no longer our personal space or personal kitchen. Much like a business like California Surf Club would certainly, our paddle boards would be under the guidelines of the Coast Guard, and we would have to know those rules and abide by those rules the same way we have to abide by health code rules, correct? And there's a certain amount of training that goes in, so each employee that works in a restaurant goes through a certain amount of training in order to be able to serve you food no matter where you choose to eat in this county. And the same would be true, I would guess that when you do write a CUP for anybody doing paddleboard rentals, that there's some amount of training that somebody that's doing the rentals is required to go through to just know what the rules and regulations of the Coast Guard are, right? I think that's all logical if you follow that. And really what it comes down to then is, as Alan was saying, really from a liability standpoint, I mean, we want to be as safe as can be because we don't want harm to fall upon anyone using that equipment. I would say too, just for our case alone, it's not so much a rental as it is, you know, an amenity. We're not seeking profit off of the use of those paddleboards. And I would also just liken sort of, I guess, the notion of there being a club. As Alan pointed out, it was discussed in those prior meetings. And I fully respect that some people may not be fully in agreement with it, but we do have clubs down there. There is a bay club for people that want to use a gym and they pay a membership fee. And there are other clubs like yacht clubs down there. Our club will have day passes, and if somebody thinks that it's a suitable way to spend their money, so be it, to come in and use the club for the day or come in and get a membership. Really, it's no different than when Chillers was there as Chillers. They charged a cover to get in. I mean, you had to pay to get in that instance as well. So, but again, back to the paddleboard thing, that would be my analogy, is it's a lot like having the health department tell you what you can and can't do, and you abide by those rules. Redondo doesn't have its own set of rules for how we can prepare food. They don't intervene in that. We just are compliant with the health department. So anyways, thank you for your time. Any questions for me?
Anybody have questions for Jeff? Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Don't leave in case we have more questions.
Got it.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm back to leaving it with Coast Guard regulations and it with the stipulation that and any other city ordinances that may apply in the future.
So what I'm hearing is strike 16 through 31 and insert in its place a condition that stipulates must be in compliance with all Coastal Commission regulations and any future. Coast Guard, sorry.
Coast Guard and other
That rolls
regulations.
off the tongue super easy for me, Coastal Commission, Coast Guard. And any future city regulations,
Regulations and
ordinances.
ordinances, yeah. That'll simplify everything we're not reinventing the wheel.
And it ensures equality in
For
terms of the
everyone.
regulations, yeah.
Roger,
I'm fine with that.
are you on board with
The-
that?
The last comment I'll make is, I was thinking about this, and we went through this with the TUP that we wrote 6 or 7 years ago, which I think only applied to Olympus.
It did. Or anyone who had a non-brick and mortar
And it-
company
yeah.
that wanted to do business in the city. They had to have so much insurance, they had to sign a
Yep.
rental agreement, yeah.
So it essentially applied to only Olympus. I think they were the only ones to ever pull a TUP.
They're the only ones that ever applied.
And it didn't apply to Paddle House. So when we do come back to this, we should look at the clauses we put in that TUP.
As a starting point,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. I didn't realize that none of the other, when you said that none of the other operators have that, that was
It was-
astonishing.
It was shocking, to say the least. One person noticed a change in the business model. They added a couple boats and asked staff to look into their existing CUP to see if it covered it, and it revealed that they didn't have a CUP. So then we started, well, who does? And it turned out nobody did, so.
Right.
And so I would turn it around and say, okay, if we look at, we did put clauses on one operator. Did that operator, did every other operator have people that died? When we look at this in the future, or were they okay with just Coast Guard rules? So, thanks.
I'm
So if
happy,
all of these go away, then the city, another path is gonna look at an ordinance, and then automatically any operator would have to comply with the ordinance.
Mhm.
Okay.
But right now, this will get this thing on the road.
Right.
It will simplify everybody's life. We're not reinventing the wheel and trying to be attorneys.
Right.
Because Ryan's not here. So I'm happy with that phrasing.
Yeah.
If anybody has a better phrasing, let's do it now.
I'm wondering about a few things. First of all, 16 actually restricts what they can rent. So, in addition to, it basically says they can rent stand-up paddleboards, canoes, and other craft that can be launched by hand. And then it goes larger vessels such as pedal boats, sailboats, or motorized watercraft of any kind are prohibited under this commercial use permit. And I'm wondering if we just want to say hand-launched vessels there and maybe leave the motorized restriction in there, because that brings up a whole nother level of things. 17 basically says they have to use a
Keep
small
that
boat.
one.
Yeah.
So you're saying keep 16,
What I would do, I'd keep 16, strike surfboard.
right?
And I think that's probably adequate for this for now, because it's really saying, here's what you can rent.
Right.
It's kind of a,
Yeah.
a CUP
Yeah.
thing.
And
Ask
then
the
add
applicant a
the
question.
condition.
I would keep 17 there, because that basically says we don't want them going down to the docks and launching them, or launching them off of the
Flips that they
rock.
don't possess, or, you know.
Yeah. 18 is basically saying, don't rent anybody that's drunk. I don't know that we need to have that specifically, or I think that's sort of implied anyway.
Under the influence would be a better.
Yeah, under the influence, yeah. Yeah, 19 saying they have to have insurance, which is probably somewhere else in their permit as well. 20 through 22 is what I would just strike and say, just comply with Coast Guard regulations.
So,
Yeah.
so keep 16, but strike surfboards.
Right.
Keep 17, 18, and 19,
19, right.
and then strike 20 all the way down.
20 through 22, 23, I'm not sure that's enforceable outside of city. I think we can strike 23 anyway, because that's covered by city law and coastal commission rules anyway. 24 is avoiding the navigation channels. We can talk about whether that one needs to be there. 25 says all signs shall comply with city applicable requirements. 26 and 27 are basically about boat repairs. I'm not sure it's really applicable in this case. And then 30 is the certificate of inspection, which I would strike.
So I think so far you're saying strike everything from 20 on.
Strike 20, yeah, I would strike 20 through 27. 28 would need to be adjusted. Because that talks about violations of 1 through 15 and then 16 through X.
We can adjust that based on how the numbering sequence
Yeah,
goes.
that's housekeeping. 29 says, "A harbor master, or any police officer, city employee's job includes enforcement of these conditions, will have the power and authority to enter free of charge at any reasonable time to inspect any vessel." I'm not sure that does anything.
Well, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, it does.
If they
I guess
don't have
so,
a
Yeah.
PFD
Yeah.
or a leash.
Yeah, so I can walk onto the SUP with them and, yeah.
That would go
Anyway, I
in
get the
new
idea there. Yeah,
ordinance?
yeah.
That one would go in the new ordinance
Yeah.
only?
That would go in the new ordinance. And strike 30, which is a certificate of inspection, which,
Yep.
yeah, and keep 31 and 32.
Is everybody good with that?
A question regarding 16.
Yeah.
What about bicycles? Are bicycles an amenity?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be, I mean,
I mean,
this is not recreational water activity, but yeah.
I don't like putting burdens on the harbor that we don't put on land. So, to be consistent, I'd like to turn around and tell everyone renting bicycles and e-bikes and cars and motorcycles in the city, hey, we have a new blood alcohol law.
I think this is the bigger discussion for the ordinance or for the future CUP.
Yeah, I want to be consistent, and I especially don't want to burden new stuff going into the harbor where we really need new commercial activity. So why are we beating up boats? Let's beat
I
up
mean,
bicycles and
I view
cars
this
too.
section as dealing with watercraft rentals, and to me, bicycles is a different category.
But let's put bicycles in the CUP too. Let's make sure they rent bicycles and not e-bikes. And let's make sure when someone gets on them, they're not over the legal limit. And, as long as they're getting in their cars, maybe they shouldn't be over the legal limit. Car's more dangerous than a
Is that
sup.
something the applicant requested?
What's that?
Bicycles, I don't know why we're talking about bicycles.
No.
But there's other, bicycle amenities.
So then the
In the area.
applicant would come ask for a revision to the CUP, right?
I'm trying to be consistent with other uses in the harbor. There's other clubs that and hotels that give out bicycles as an amenity.
Oh,
And so
they're
we'll
not
need
their
this clause in
CUPs?
there in the future.
I guess, yeah, so broader question, how are other CUPs different? Do they completely lack a definition of what they can rent?
For what?
Other harbor
There are no CUPs.
hotel? You're giving an example of a
There
hotel.
are no CUPs. So, but if
They're
we're
not
putting these
renting, they're just
CUPs here,
giving-
I will want to put those CUPs, these conditions in the other CUPs so that we're consistent across the board. Because I'm trying not to burden new businesses in the harbor and on the water more than we are doing on land. Because I want there to be new businesses and new activity in the harbor.
So I'm trying to think of an example where this is unique that compared to other leases, like, would there be a leasee that wants to rent a kayak in their, we would not want them to because they're in a location that's gonna cause problem with transit to the water. And maybe that's a case why this kind of thing would be in a CUP and not just eliminated.
I'm lost.
I know, yeah, I'm very,
Yeah, I'm lost. I'm totally lost now.
What this discussion would kind of is leaning to is that a future commercial recreational use dedicated to bicycles, we could, as staff, add BAC or driving under the influence type conditions. Whether or not there are examples, though, that exist. We haven't had a commercial recreational use on land for some time. And then from the hotel example, those bicycle, it might have been overlooked. Those bicycle rentals are considered very ancillary for hotel uses. And so when a hotel comes in, it's usually one of the very few last things, or if at all, that applicants or staff will consider. But it's something that staff, the community development department, can consider adding for future commercial recreational uses on land as well, to be consistent with the waterfront.
to try to simplify it a little bit, 16 was geared towards his business model. Everything listed there besides surfboards, which we're going to strike because it's not a part of his business model. It's exactly what he wants to do.
Oh, please step up. Clarification.
I was unaware that you needed to ask permission for bikes. Is that a rule? We plan on having bikes. I've never known that to be a regulation that you would have to have permission for bikes, or if there's rules
We have
associated with that.
bike rental facilities in the harbor.
Got it. Well, and this is semantics. We're not renting anything.
It's included in the membership, is that?
Yes,
Yes.
or the day rate.
Right.
So if you pay a fee, you have use of the amenities inside. So there's,
And Portofino Hotel has the same thing, and Bay Club has the
every
same
hotel
thing.
does
There's-
bikes.
Yeah.
every
So
single hotel down there has.
if we're
bikes.
worried about a conflict with the bike rental company at the corner of, Harbor and Barrel, that ship has sailed. We shouldn't worry about that. And all these groups are able to hand out bikes, without having to put a sticker on the bike or a helmet on the person or check somebody's blood alcohol level.
I think there's a slight difference too. The hotels are renting, they're not renting the bike. I mean, maybe they are, but those are ancillary uses for their people staying at the hotel.
So it's included in there.
The bike rental spot is for people coming down that are going to park and rent a bike, right? So I don't think they're similar. And in our instance, I have no desire to get into the paddleboard or bike rental business. That's not my business. Our business is to provide some cool amenities for people to go do what I believe we've all been talking about for the past, I've been listening for 8 years on just enjoying the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
We came down, hey, let's grab some bikes. Cool, take them. Be safe, wear a helmet. Or if you paddleboard, hey, be safe. Do you know how to ride a paddleboard? You want to take a class with Danny first? So I do whatever is going to make everybody comfortable that we're being safe. But I would say that we bear the largest burden by far to make sure it's safe. Getting liability insurance in California right now to cover this activity is so expensive, it's almost not worth doing. But we've already committed to doing it, so we're doing it. So trust me when we say, we're heavily incented to make sure these activities are safe. But if I have to get permission for bikes, and by the way, that was also in the presentation, so I hope there's no sleight of hand going on.
That's why I brought it up. That's
Then please, I would like to add bikes, although we're talking about watercraft, so I'm slightly confused.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that this is an ancillary use. It's an ancillary use to the commercial recreation use. It's one aspect of that. The only reason why there's a bunch of conditions of approval in here is to improve safety on the water. That's it. They can all go away and he can still operate as is.
So I apologize for the confusion. What I'm trying to do is make a level playing field with other businesses in the area already doing the same thing in land and on sea, and especially not have it in the CUP, which is like a nuclear weapon for your business and any other new business. And the analogy I keep thinking back to is we put burdens in a TUP on Olympus that we put on no one else. And Olympus was a good operator and they ain't there anymore.
And nobody has to follow the conditions we'll have to follow unless an ordinance is passed, which is why I think a fair and reasonable thing to do would be for us to make a commitment, because that's how you can start to get people to adhere to these regulations and make a commitment that, and you can put this in a CUP with teeth, we make a commitment to abide by any future ordinance related to safety as it relates to watercraft. So if you guys come up with an ordinance in 3 months or 9 months or 6 months or 10 months, you don't have to come back and ask our permission. We have already made a commitment that we will, but to hold us to some arbitrary rules that we all think of tonight, and then maybe you guys never even pass, I would agree. It does seem kind of,
Burdensome.
it's just random. It's just arbitrary.
And I think that's where Commissioner Callahan's revised condition makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think Roger's just questioning, do we keep N16? Well, I don't know what you're asking.
I would strike these others as well.
I think you're basically saying, let's strike 16 through 30 or 31.
And input,
And you can just run the business, you can run your business, be safe and follow the rules.
That's essentially what I'm saying. And I'm especially concerned about being consistent across all the businesses doing the same thing.
So is the consensus we strike 16 through
31.
31 and add one in there that says compliance with Coast Guard regulation
And future,
and future city ordinances?
that's what I'm hearing.
That would be
Throw in
my,
state ordinance, state and county ordinances in there too, just for completion.
that would be my motion, but I understand I'm being an outlier here.
Well, that was.
Are there any in here that we don't have purview over, like city risk manager said they have to be in here? 19, 31, 32, can those be stricken or?
Sure.
Yeah, they indemnify the city.
Yeah, that's a precautionary one, just to make sure that they're covered. Sounds like they are already.
But it seems like, so you think they'd be okay with that being struck then, like 31, for instance, that?
As long as we put abides by all Coast Guard, state, county, and future local ordinances. I mean, insurance is a requirement under those prestances.
I guess one thing, we're talking about it as if there's a city ordinance coming that then this would all then apply, but a city ordinance isn't gonna, I wouldn't think a city ordinance would require, make these requirements on things that are not rented,
Correct. They wouldn't.
so.
So if it was your personal paddleboard,
Well, he's not renting, so,
Well, I think you'd argue he's making it available as part of his business versus,
it's a business enterprise. Yeah.
It's all inclusive.
yeah.
so if there's safety things that we want, best practices for all these people to do, we just have to be careful in constructing that would still apply if it's not a rental.
I'm
But
sure.
if you're a rental company and you're doing something that the Coast Guard doesn't like, you're in trouble. I mean, think of the Conception
Yeah, no,
dive
I'm not
boat
thinking
fire.
of Coast Guard things. I'm just thinking simple things like, here's a map of the harbor. Don't do stupid, like that kind of level.
We put that on Jeremy and there are maps of the harbor up.
Yeah. That's,
There is a map,
that's really
there is a
good.
map of the harbor at the hand launch because of the TUP we put on Jeremy. And I think there's a second one at Paddle House. All those who've been to the hand launch and seen the map, raise your hand.
And I am sure that if there are complaints, consistent complaints to the harbor master or the police department about these patrons, that there will be changes made, either voluntary or by the city.
Yeah, really, the city needs to do a better job.
That's how
of-
Jeremy ended up with his agreement, is there were complaints that too many businesses were using the hand launch and local citizens couldn't use it at all without standing in line. So the Harbor Commission said, okay, if you want to use the hand launch as a commercial entity, then you have to have insurance, you have to pay the city, and you have to follow some rules. So, let's just simplify and streamline everything and get this show on the road. Any dissent?
And Lisa, I know you're concerned about, paddle boarders in the fairway. This is going to be 6 of 400 on a busy day. And
No.
I think the safety net is
I'm-
the harbor patrol.
I'm less concerned, like Dave pointed out, these are going to be water people. I'm not so concerned about the water people as I am the people who've never been out on the water and have no clue.
Yeah.
So, but as you pointed out, it's supposed to be fair. The problem is there is not a fair sharing of the knowledge of being on the water as there may be for a bicycle on land or for an automobile on land. I'm not worried about this. I think these guys were probably going to do all of this stuff anyway, because like they pointed out, it's smart to do. We also have rules at other places that they follow that aren't necessarily mandated by the city. When stand-up paddleboarding first exploded, I myself walked down to where they were renting the little pedal boats and said, hey, why don't you use a map? We made a map and took it to them and said, why don't you guys use a map and tell them where they can and can't go? I don't think anybody's against the education, and I understand why you are against dictating things for one that aren't for the other. But yes, I am still concerned about the safety, but I'll just have to be concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm against adding a rule that's already there and adding it, and especially adding that rule unevenly. Because I still worry about, the dive and surf kayak that leaves the harbor on a bad day.
And REI, and I
Yeah.
understand your point.
Thanks.
But I don't think we can, you've read 31 and 32, right? That's actually legalese for indemnifying the city against somebody going out there having an accident and then going after the city. It seems like that would have to be, right? I don't think we can.
Yeah.
So leave 31 and 32.
Yeah.
32 absolutely should stay. 31, because they're going to be doing it. It makes sense to release us of liability.
So we're looking at taking out 16 through 30 and adding compliance with Coast Guard regulations and any local, county, state, and federal regulations.
Kind of a catch-all.
So I think I just made a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So
Actually, I have a point of order. Do we need to close the public hearing first?
Oh, we do. Thank you.
Actually, we need to do public comment too.
Yeah, public comments. Do we have any? Thank you, Lee.
I guess, can I just make one more comment? I know we said club 100 times that meeting, definitely not arguing with that. I think it was just the fact that it's really this item 15 membership program, because it wasn't in that original CUP, that it didn't come across. And I just wanted to make sure that the public that we had done our job for the public, that we had buttoned that up properly. And I didn't know what that process was, so.
actually, I have one more too. I'm not sure, when you say get rid of 16, I don't have a problem with getting rid of 17 through 29. But 16 is defining what vessels they can have. And don't we have an operator now who had a certain kind of vessel and didn't have a limit on that vessel and then went and got other kinds of vessels and that they weren't supposed to have?
That's the impetus of us finding out that none of the businesses in Basin 3 even have a CUP.
So do you plan going forward to define what sorts of vessels are allowed?
Yes.
Then I think 16 should stay, with the exception of surfboards.
But that will be up to this.
Yeah, so I'm saying, I don't think we leave this open to a fleet of Duffies.
Right.
Then that has to stay.
Or wave runners or whatever else is.
Or wave runners or whatever, motorized.
Yeah. And maybe add bikes on here, but.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing a circle
Yeah.
again.
I
We're
can
going
go
around
either
in a
way on
circle.
16, but
Okay, let's ask for public comment. Is there anybody holding?
There are no e-comments and
No
we have a
Zoom?
participant in Zoom, but his hand is not raised. So I don't believe he wants to speak. Right?
If you're out there and you're in Zoom, do you want to raise your hand?
We have Mark Hansen.
Ah,
Go ahead,
I
Mark.
thought we'd escaped. All right, shall we hear from Mark Hansen?
Ye of so little faith. How you doing, guys? I'm sorry I couldn't be with
Yeah.
you tonight. I'm working on opening day ceremonies in a different meeting. Any rate, I like the direction you guys are going in general, but I just want to emphasize a couple things. I don't have a problem with surfboards staying in there. I mean, they do have a California Surf Club, and if people want to rent a board from them, they obviously can't launch in the harbor, but they could take the board and launch on the beach if the business happened to want to do that. Second point is, why were we dictating that everything they rented had to launch at the public launch ramp? Again, I think that's up to the business. If they want to take a chance on letting people take their equipment someplace else, to me, that's a business decision. No reason for us to get involved with that. Also, kind of a technicality maybe, but there have been events where, for instance, when there was a paddle event in the harbor, Olympus brought some of their equipment down to King Harbor Yacht Club because we didn't have enough boards. That would be illegal under the language that's typed in there right now. So I don't see any reason to restrict that. Also, the language about a leash. I don't recall the Coast Guard requiring a leash. I don't remember if we're requiring leashes of Paddle House or Olympus. So again, as somebody else was saying, we do want to create a level playing field and not impose any special regulations on this operator that we haven't put on others. And I don't recall offhand a Coast Guard requiring a leash. Final item is the night restriction. There's groups of paddlers out right now with lights paddling. So again, and I think those are organized, and I don't know if they're going in and saying, "Mother, may I," to the Harbor Patrol, but a lot of boaters, these are vessels, a lot of boaters go boating at night, and I'm not sure why we put a restriction again on that particular business if at some point they decide they want to send people out with lights in the harbor. There's nothing, uniquely dangerous about that. So anyway, I think you guys are going in a good direction, but please consider those 4 comments as you finalize your motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any other Zoom holders?
No one else in Zoom.
Okay. Shall we close the public hearing? Motion?
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect. Okay, back to our discussion, and we need a motion.
Yeah, I have one.
Well, we had one, but I didn't do the public participation and close the hearing, so I could repeat it. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was eliminate 16 through 30 and insert compliance with Coast Guard regulations, local, county, state, and federal ordinances.
Correct.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Almost unanimous.
5-1.
Whew. I feel like we earned that one. Okay, where are we here? Are we to the director's report?
Yeah, I've got a few updates for everybody. Public boat launch project, as I alluded to in the previous discussion, we got our parking study, we got our circulation study, we got our demand study, we got, what else did we get, Dave? And we are reviewing those studies as we speak. We're kind of working back and forth with the consultant to make sure that they're comprehensive and fit our needs. Once we have that finalized, we'll get the subcommittee together so we can go over the results and then go from there.
And Greg, we also have a coastal criteria and hazards analysis
Oh, that's
study.
right. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, woke me up.
The marina parking lot improvements, those continue to progress. The north side is under construction as we speak. I think slurry started it was supposed to start last Friday of the north side. I don't know if that actually happened. I didn't go down there that day. But that's happening as we speak. California Surf Club's scheduled to be open in April, so it'll be done. The north side will be done to coincide with that. We're also doing a lighting package. We'll be demoing the toll booth in lieu of actual parking enforcement going out there and looking for people to have paid via phone app or via pay station. So that's making progress. Break wall repairs. Our city manager alluded to this. We got good news that that project is commencing. We were a little nervous when the federal government froze a lot of the grant funding that had been awarded previously. We did finally get notice from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that that project has been funded and is moving forward. Last meeting, we talked about the International Boardwalk pavers, just how great of a project that was. We had a ribbon cutting ceremony, and there was a discussion about how they are cracking already. And I spoke with our public works personnel, and they confirmed that it was cracking, and not just in areas that were, potentially expected where there's high traffic or whatever, but essentially those pavers are under warranty, and the company's actually bringing out new pavers to help replace as needed. What I heard was it was a soft batch, if that's a technical term for the pavers. So hopefully we don't have to replace all of them over time. I don't know, but as I know it, the pallets are being delivered this month. So we'll be able to start making those repairs. Seaside Lagoon, we continue to make progress there. We're meeting with the State Water Board next week to just kind of go over some safety regulations and minimum requirements that they're going to place on it. They're gearing up for the entitlement phase, as you guys know. So they're doing the environmental reports right now, the studies, the phase one. They're going to be also looking at parking to see just how much parking is needed. A park or an open space actually doesn't have a parking requirement pursuant to municipal code, but we'd be foolish to ignore the fact that it's going to drive demand and it's going to take up supply from that parking supply. Once we have all those kind of studies done, I'll reconvene the subcommittee. We can kind of go through the results of that as well. Waterfront education facility, as everybody knows, we're talking to Marine Mammal Care Center. That's ongoing. We're looking into getting into agreement with them, which is essentially a commitment and a partnership between the two. And whatever document we decide on that shows that commitment level, it's what Marine Mammal needs to be able to raise the money to officially jump in with 2 feet. So we're working on that. And then I do want to briefly go over a really big project that just got approved at City Council. It's the Port Royal Option Agreement. It was approved on the consent calendar on February 18th. It was actually pulled, and they pulled it to discuss it because it was a good news item. But essentially, their 55-year lease or 60-year lease is coming to an end. They've got about 8 years left on it. And what we did was we negotiated what we're calling the option, which means if they hit certain benchmarks, then a new 50-year lease is enacted. And what they're proposing to do is rebuild all 350 slips. They're going to do the new promenade that the amenities plan talks about. Their portion that fronts the promenade, they will build for us. They're actually moving one of their buildings, it's a restroom building, further back and rebuilding it to accommodate the promenade. I think the restroom is a little tired as well, so it's probably due, but they're actually accommodating the promenade itself. So what the option stipulates is that they've got to receive the entitlements from this group. They've got to receive Coastal Commission approval. They've got to get building permits issued, and they have to show that construction is financed. And when they do those things, the lease is essentially active. We think the construction process could take a while. They're probably going to have to involve the construction of some temporary slips somewhere. We haven't figured that out just yet. It'll be part of the entitlement project. But essentially, you're going to have to move boats to the temporary location to demo the ones that they used to occupy, to rebuild them, and you're going to phase it out until eventually they're all rebuilt. Complicated project, but represents the largest private investment in our harbor in a very long time. We're talking minimum 14 million. I think it's closer to 30 million. The option stipulates that it's going to be at least 14. I think that's a low estimate, just based on how much it costs for our own Harbor Patrol docks to be replaced. But yeah, I wanted to highlight that with you. Timing wise, I'm not sure. They're motivated. They're going to start the entitlement process as soon as possible. I'd say, a project for a design review application would go before this group maybe within a year and a half. Coastal Commission could take another 9 months beyond that. Building permits is 6 to 8 months because you're getting the plans really detailed and how they're constructed. So maybe we're under construction in 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, something like that. And that's them being aggressive, really going after it. So, but that's all rough. All those dates are pretty rough. Next meeting, we do have an agenda planned. I want to talk about the strategic plan. In late May, the city council, I think it's late April, actually. Late April, city council will be reconvening to go over the strategic plan, which is essentially their list of criteria that they want staff to tackle over the next 6 months. So at the meeting, I'll kind of go over everything that we're currently working on and that we expect to be finished by the time the strat plan moves along. I'll also kind of go into what I think are logical next steps. A lot of the strat plan items are step 1 or step 3 of a logical succession where there's a next step. And that usually materializes in the form of a new strat plan item to tackle that next step. So I'll go through what I think is logical in terms of what we'll be tackling as a next step. And we'll kind of go, and there's going to be a couple items that probably carry over that we didn't quite finish. So between the carryover, what I expect to be, logical next projects, we'll get a kind of a list of what I expect to see. And then if there's anything that you think is missing that we need to be paying attention to, some new ideas, some version of the amenities plan, short-term list of projects that you want us to tackle. Usually what we do is we form another subcommittee to write a letter that lists what projects you support. That letter is submitted to city council on the day that they are, meeting to talk about the strat plan. I will say this is historically the only group that provides any context. And it's really helpful for me is that if and when city council runs out of ideas or just says, Greg, what do you think? I can just go off of this list and I know that as a whole, us and me are on the same page about what projects we think should be tackled next. It's very helpful for me. I don't feel like I'm on the spot and I feel like we're all together on it, which is helpful. So that'll be April. We're hopeful that potentially the CUP for Basin 3 could be discussed. That sounds like it's a big discussion based on what happened tonight. But it's looking more likely it's going to be May just for timing reasons. But we'll get into that when we get into that. So those are the 2 items that we'll have for April. So let me know if you can't make it. I know Commissioner Abelman said he will be there. But we definitely want to make sure we have a quorum to talk about those issues.
It's finally not spring break week after
I know.
4 years. It's always lined up.
Question, do you know if they're going to do any bus parking areas in the Seaside Lagoon parking thing?
So the Nuvis, our consultant for Seaside, is considering that.
Okay.
There's not a requirement that there needs to be
Yeah,
one.
because I know they usually go through the little turn, let everybody off, and then have to go to the community and find a place to park,
Right.
usually up Francisca, and then they get called to come back and get the kids.
Right.
So it would be nice if, they probably can't accommodate all the buses, but it would be nice to have
At least one, right?
one. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see, because I mean, we've got this surplus of parking right now, but we know that Seaside Lagoon will eat into that supply. We know the boat launch will eat into that supply. A bus kind of depot area for it to pull off
Right.
could potentially eat up, 10 spaces or so. So, I mean, it starts to add up a little bit, but certainly
Yeah.
if we can fit one, we'll put one.
Okay. That was my only question. Roger?
I have a
Oh, do
question.
you have one?
Before I lose it, the 50-year, the Port Royal, as part of that requirement to have a financial, to be funded,
Mhm.
is there a requirement for a certain percentage of reserve funding?
No. Not a requirement outlined in the option, just that they've got financing available.
And this is already a done deal, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and
would-
do they have a time limit on that,
A time limit on,
on getting all that in place? I know you gave us a thing, but like, their lease is up in 8 years. Is any, as long as they get done before the 8 years, or is there a shorter time limit?
so there's language in there that says, yeah, they've got to do it before the 8 years. There's also language in there that says if either party, or if they decide earlier that they're just not going to make it, that they can pull the plug as well. And the option essentially expires and the lease, potential for that lease extension expires as well.
Lisa, do you have anything?
And so that's all final.
Correct.
Yeah, and there's no, I mean, they always come up with like 50 years, and wouldn't it be great if it was like 30 years? You know, we had a little bit, 25, you know what I'm saying? Because 50 is a long,
Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised it didn't come to us at all.
right?
And I would have expected there to be some requirement for reserves if you've got all those years and if you come up with if you
Yeah.
underestimate how much money you need.
And negotiations between city council and,
Yeah.
it's not your guys' purview.
Yeah, not for final approval, but just
Right.
input.
Just like input, yeah, kind of like what Mike did. He popped down and, got some input.
Roger, do you have anything for the director?
No, but I mean, we get what the city council offers us,
Yeah.
we've seen that. Did you find out anything on the bait barge? I've poked around too, trying to find out if the bait barge is back open. And the guys at Sport Fishing weren't sure.
The one over in one of the moorings?
The bait barge out in the middle of the harbor,
Out
they
in the
were
middle of the
rebuilding.
harbor.
It was closed for the month of February, rebuilding the pens, improving it.
Gosh, we were just looking at that when we were doing a different exercise.
Don't worry about it. I'll ask around.
Okay, well,
It ought to be open sometime this month. I'm not
Okay.
sure if it is yet.
okay, we'll find out for you.
I do have two things.
Thanks.
Oh,
Sorry.
Commissioner Falk has come up with two
Two questions from last time. The artificial reef thing,
Oh, yeah, that's happening in April as well. We're gearing up for that. Sorry, I
Okay.
omitted that from my report.
and then I don't know if this will be coming back up or not, but the marina parking lot improvements, right at the end of that, it says, city staff is converting a portion of the dock in front of the Foss building into a pay-by-the-hour dinghy dock. I'm curious as to the pay-by-the-hour part, because in my travels around Southern California, I've never had to pay at a dinghy dock. You pay because you put your big boat at a mooring, and you pay to keep your boat in a slip. So I'm curious why you would have paying for a dinghy dock.
I can probably answer that. They don't want people permanently mooring their dinghies there.
Correct.
Hmm.
We want it to be visitor serving.
Yeah, it's because somebody who doesn't have a place to put their sabot or their little sailboat is going to tie it up there, tie up a parking place, and then the people who we want to come in are not going to be able to patronize the businesses. Anybody else have questions for the director?
No.
Well, with that, I think it's time to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, see you next month.